Your Grace, it's an incredible thing all the time when anyone says to chat with you, when it comes to your experiences, when it comes to church, when it comes to ministry. It looks like there's nowhere anyone can turn and you don't tower.
You've not talked about basketball.
We've not gone into sports. Let's not even go into the history of football, coming back to basketball.
Or even journalism.
Or even journalism. It's an incredible thing all the time to sit down and just have this discussion, because we are in a situation where it would seem that our generation needs to open its ears and listen and learn a lot. And so we're having this chat because we just want to tap into the insight of two levels. One is, a lot of people will be asking, what makes you? I mean, we'll just read into your personality, your mind, your thought about issues, generally speaking. But the other aspect too is to just also look at ministry. But let's start personally. Like we all know, you have just come back from this incredible, amazing treatment that is all over the world. So it will not do justice to our meeting if we don't ask how you are now. Mm-hmm. And again, to tap into what was your experience throughout your ailment.
I think that you have delved into nearly what makes me me. Hassan, this is quite delicate, but I will try to be brief. First of all, let me answer you correctly. The first to your series of questions is to say that I am deeply grateful. Eternity will bear me witness how grateful I am that God has made me me. If God made a butterfly, that's a butterfly, and she's grateful for being a butterfly. If God made an elephant, that's who he is. God is grateful for being So I'm trying to say for the world to hear and understand that I'm exceptionally, deeply grateful to God that I was born by John and Elsie Kwashi. I'm eternally grateful that I was born in the family that I am, with my senior sisters and junior sisters. I thank God for my height. I thank God for my chemistry. I thank God for the school I went. I went to St. Luke's. I finished in St. Luke's Primary School in Jos, went to military school. And when I got the call of God, I went to TCNN. Specifically, my bishop sent me to TCNN, Bishop Boemi did. And I finished. And also through the life, I got my first degree in TCNN. And later on, I did my Doctor of Ministries in the seminary of Trinity School for Ministry in Pennsylvania, Ambridge. And then I got a Doctor of Divinity also in Wisconsin, Nashotah House. This has been the journey of my life. But also I'm deeply grateful for how God has led me in my search for a life partner to meet with Gloria in TCNN. Through Gloria, we have 6 children. Hanatu, who's a physician, she is married to Matthew. Gabriel, Rinji, who's a priest and is married to Helen. There are 3 beautiful girls. Pangak, who just got married to Blessing, Shangrut, and Albert, who's a physician, and Nendal, who's a lawyer, and Nganmanin, who's training to be an animal scientist. But we have about 70 or more other children that we have adopted with us, thanks to Gloria. Now, it is within that context of life and ministry that after my ordination, I have served under different canons, district chairman. In the Diocese of Kaduna, I joined in the Diocese of Northern Nigeria, but eventually, in my ordained years, I served under different archdeacons and canons, whom I will never forget. I'll never forget Reverend Canon Machi and his wife, Venerable Adeni and his wife, Canon at that time, Farron, Josiah and his wife, Comfort, who's now Archbishop. And those were the key leaders that supervised my growth as a young deacon and priest. So I've grown in that way, and then I became a bishop. So in serving as a bishop, what I've always been called to be from 1978, when the Lord laid his hands on me in a call to serve in the mission field, clearly my call was to be a rural evangelist and pastor. So in becoming a bishop, that has followed me as well, or that is what I've pursued, because that's my call. It's my duty to prove my call, and that is how I pursued. Fast forward, about 11 months ago, I was diagnosed to have a cancer in the hospital here. So Professor Mike Misono, a young Bachama man, brilliant guy, did his job and sent me to several other doctors who confirmed indeed that was a cancer. In God's divine arrangement, he guided my foot to Roanoke, to my friend, Bishop Quigg and his wife, Annette Lawrence, who contacted my coordinating surgeon, Bob Williams. And Bob Williams formed a team of 4, all of whom agreed to do this colon cancer surgery, and in the hope that in 8 weeks I will recover and come back home. But again, God had a surprise for us, because when they opened me up, they found out that my liver also was affected, and they had to look for a 5th surgeon, a 5th doctor. So Dr. Dampa, interestingly, from Ivory Coast, was the specialist of liver. And he came, he was traveling but didn't travel, so they got him, and he happened to be around. They got him, and he came and did a liver surgery. So after all of that, I was now put in the hands of Dr. Paul Richards, who was the oncologist. The surgeon was Dr. Merge Ellis. The anesthetist, who's an amazing man, I mean, you wouldn't believe it. He will lull you to sleep and take you into surgery. Janad is a wonderful man. And all of these people put their heads together, fine Christian people who did a fantastic job at Roanoke Hospital. And by the time the oncologist would look at everything on my paper that came to him, he was absolutely certain, when they put their heads together, that the only way they can guarantee or do their best is to take me through the full regiment of 12 cycles of chemotherapy. Mark, you had taken 1 chemotherapy with Dr. Mike Misono in Jos. So I already know what it was by 1 in Jos. In God's divine arrangement, he took me and took this chemotherapy for me, because there was no way in my human strength or imagination I would have been able to take 13 chemos. I did. At the Christmas break, I thought I would take a Christmas break and go to be with my younger sister. My immediate younger sister is also a physician. She has a practice with Mankato Clinic, which is part of the Mayo Clinics. And she looked after me for about 6, 7, 8 weeks. She and her younger sister, Anna, they looked after us. And we were able to take through, and then went back to Roanoke to continue. Long story cut short, miracles happened. By the end of April, my oncologist, in consultation with all the other doctors and nurses, concluded that I can walk away. So I rang the bell, and believe me, I walked away. I came back here. My diocesan team of medical practitioners, the pharmacists, the surgeons, the nurses all came together to see me. And they asked, and I gave them the whole file. Everybody looked at it and said, no referral? I said, no referral. No medicine? I said, no medicine. So I now took the whole thing and gave it to my initial doctor, Professor Misono, who has looked at it. And 3 days ago, I went for his exams, and I'm waiting for his own official reply. So here I am, from the chemistry of who I am to what God has made me. So everything I do, I play music, I play basketball, I still do stuff that I can do. I'm a journalist and all of that. I want to be thankful to God for putting me in the family where I am, from the village where I come from how I got to know Jesus Christ, from the hereditary that I have inherited from my grandparents who are the initial missionaries here from 1919, to my father who was the first headmaster here, 1936, and how God has made me to who I am. All of this plus cancer. Listen to me, Hassan, I'm grateful to God.
Incredible story. Now, let me draw a line from who you are now into ministry, because you've laid that foundation. Yeah. Because the totality again of what we have heard is your complete commitment to the ministry that God has put in your hands. Yeah. But let me move. I will be looking at the local ministry. So when I say local, we're looking at the Nigerian context and God's calling in your life. But let me look at GovCon, because you are now, you are the executive secretary of GovCon. In addition to the responsibilities you have in, local missions, we can take so many minutes or hours talking about the development of your ministry, rural evangelists, like you said, expanding this diocese, Just Diocese, and so many other things. But again, I'm driving this because I'm looking at the expansion of GovCon from 2008 till now, the local and the global ministry. What is your thought? What give us an insight into this ministry that starts from your evangelistic background, expanding the gospel to now its international platform?
Well, I will be specific with names, because I was in the missions commission for the Anglican Church, Anglican Communion. The chairman of our commission was Rowan Williams, who later became the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the executive secretary for missions was, at that time, Dr. Cyril Okorocha, who became Bishop of Owerri. And it was our job to get the Anglican Communion enthusiastic in fulfilling the 10 years decade of evangelism within the communion. And Dr. Cyril Okorocha was a gifted, very gifted mobilizer for mission. In fact, he wrote several things which got the provinces of the Anglican Church motivated for missions and evangelism. In fact, we had a midway decade of evangelism. I think it was in 1995 in Kanuga. And that review process was to again launch out the provinces to commit themselves to the decade of evangelism. The reports were to be taken in 1998. The Right Honorable Dr. George Carey, who was Archbishop of Canterbury, was willing to take the report. So when we went to Lambeth 1998, the Office of Evangelism was scrapped, and the report on evangelism had not been taken till date. So it was obvious to Archbishop Adetiloye and other bishops of the third world countries who were committed to the decade of evangelism and took it enthusiastically. in not only growing churches, no, but literally doing primary evangelism and seeing converts to Jesus Christ from other religions, whatever religions they may be. We saw literally, and for me, those were the exciting moments of my life because I had just become Bishop of Jos, and there were just about 87 congregations in the whole Diocese of Jos, which comprised of Plateau State and Nasarawa State's political geographical areas. And we walked, and within the first 6 years, Adetule was prepared to cut off Lafia and give it a diocese, because from 87 we had grown to about 190 congregations with nearly 100 pastors. And then we cut down to just Plateau State, and we walked, because the joy that I have and the thrive that I get from ministry, my motivation, my mobilization, is not that I don't do city ministries, but it is rural ministry. And I can explain why that is so, because I am an ardent disciple of Ajayi Crowther. I am an ardent disciple of the CMS missionaries that came to my home area in 1907. They were Cambridge University graduates, people with qualified certificates, doctors and all of that. And they did the work in Panyam and Kabir. And within 10 years of their ministry, they had reached Bauchi Highlands. Can you believe that? Within 10 years. And there were only 7 missionaries. So I'm a student of missions, and I love to see primary evangelism, because that's how God works. He works, yes, in the cities, but rural ministry, the forgotten, the poor, and the helpless are always at the heart of it. Anyway, so we did that work, and then Akinola becomes primate. Akinola was so excited with the work in Plateau State. He broke my diocese into 3 and 4, believe it or not, so that the work will thrive. But we were now facing a Lambeth conference in 2008 that was unprepared to take our offering from God, which God gave us. That is to say, we probably are poor financially, but we are not poor evangelistically. We are not poor with manpower. There is something we can offer to the world. But it was clear that Lambeth Conference was unwilling, and in some cases unable, to take our offering. And Akinola was very polite, because if you read his paper, The Road, how did he put it? Treacherous or difficult road to Lambeth. I mean, I like that particular paper because it formed the basis upon which all the primates who moved away from Lambeth Conference, you could see how they were treated badly. They swallowed it. They were humble enough to take it. They were looked down upon. They took it. They went to several meetings, the outcome of which, if you want to know more about it, read the book of Akinola, Who Blinks First, and you will see why by the end of May, Akinola immediately recruited me. I wasn't even in country. He didn't know, but he just called me on phone. Ben, I want you in Tel Aviv on this. You know how he works. So I was in Chicago on the 30th. On the 6th, I had to be in Tel Aviv to meet with Chris Sugden, Martin Means, Archbishop Oko, and Vinay Samuel, who couldn't come. So 4 of us at the end of April, early May, to meet and organize the conference in June, which became to be known as GAFCON. So what GAFCON met at that first meeting, those who led GAFCON to the place where it is, chief movers of GAFCON, Akinola, Archbishop Peter Jensen, and Archbishop Henry Orombi Luke. And at that time also, Archbishop Valentino and Archbishop Munir, they put their lives to that movement and produced what is now known as the Jerusalem Declaration. My role and the rest of us was behind the scenes, We were making sure everybody got accommodation, and at other times we thought of the theological implications and so on. But those who did the real work are the ones I mentioned. Then those at the back of the theological discussions would be Chris Ogden, Vinay Samuel, Archbishop Oko, Archbishop Nwosu, myself, and a few others who thought behind the scenes of what GAFCON should look like. So GAFCON began 2008 on the defense of the faith. Jude, 1 Peter. We saw clearly that the infiltration of a cultural, I don't want to call it theology, a cultural idea was forming into a theology imposed on Scripture. It was a revisionist agenda which seemed to promote that what we now believe is no longer tenable, but a new system of belief that was acceptable to the culture of the modern world is what we should be promoting. That was the first approach. But the second approach was that a secularist idea is more acceptable to the generations and generations to come than an ancient biblical teaching. I don't want to call it idea. Biblical teaching is not an idea. It's the real word of God for who God is. But thirdly, that the norm of evangelism as we received it from the apostles' teaching is no longer practicable. And we sit down and say, excuse me, what are you talking about? So fast forward to 2 years ago, we've had Jerusalem 1, Kenya 2, Jerusalem 3, where I was appointed General Secretary. So I'm not a novice to the struggles of where we are, but I must admit, I do not know what the future holds. What I do know is that we've moved away from being on the defense. We are pursuing now what delays we may have had from 1998. We've been delayed. Jesus wants the whole world saved. God does not desire that anyone should perish. What God wants is that we give the knowledge of salvation to the world, and the world is willing to accept it if only we explain it correctly, if only we explain it as God wants, if only we explain it with humility, with simplicity, in the power of the Holy Spirit. The Word of God has sufficient in itself, the integrity of God to be able to save anybody, and dare I say, any sinner. But that's not what the world wants to hear. As I speak, even now, over 35 people were killed day before yesterday, just about 10 kilometers away from us. 5 kilometers from us here, there has been an over 5 days of killings of people. You need to see, and I hope I can provide for you the video of those who were massacred, those who survived and gathered in a church, Venerable Mukang and Justice Okoronko, when the people were saying, we want to go to heaven, we don't care, they can burn our homes, they can burn our this, but Jesus will take us to heaven. These people in Naraguta, same thing. I mean, we didn't create this, we didn't give them any money, they don't have money, the rains are falling, they have nowhere to sleep, no blanket, but they are joyful in the Lord. Now, and you want to tell me that this gospel that was 2,000 years ago needs to be changed, or that it's not tenable? I see the tenability right now. I see the veracity of the power of God at work. So that's the GAFCON I'm leading now.
You're a living miracle of that tenacity and the power of that Bible. I mean, here we are. But how, therefore, for those who are wondering, 13 years now of GAFCON, how far have we gone? What is the impact, the power, the spread of GAFCON now? We can count
provinces that align with GAFCON. But I will not do so because I don't want to dive into politics. I'm not a man who cares about numbers because that doesn't impress God. I mean, God reduces numbers to 300 to win his battle. In fact, he shocked the whole of Israel with just Jonathan and his servant, and he won the battle. So that's not for me. If you know me well, I'm not a politician. I don't do politics. But I'm so convinced that God's work done in his way will always have the results, the desired results. So right now, in a few weeks' time, we'll be meeting in GAFCON. We've not been able to meet in COVID. We'll be meeting in Nairobi. And I know of at least 8 primates who have committed themselves to wanting to be in Nairobi, face to face. The others will be on Zoom. So if we are looking at the spread of GAFCON, I can tell you that from the little group that we were in 2008, we have GAFCON branches in the UK, we have in New Zealand, we have one growing this week and in the next few weeks in Australia. We already have the Diocese of Sydney solidly from the birth of GAFCON, still in GAFCON, but Australia as a nation, as a province, developments are coming that will form another branch, including Sydney. We have another growing branch in Europe as a whole. So apart from the UK, we also have Europe. I don't want to mention African provinces, but you can count solidly a majority of the Anglican provinces in Africa solidly GAFCON. Although there might be splits in some cases, some still have are unsure of where they belong, whether they want to align with non-GAFCON or other branches. So long as it is Bible-based, so long as it is evangelistic, so long as it is salvific in its approach and its beliefs, we're fine. We're not trying to split the Anglican Communion. Far from it. We are a movement within the Anglican Communion. Latin America is one of the fastest growing GAFCON movements that we have, led by Brazil. The US, of course, long before now. Before the GAFCON branch would be formed even in the US, the tech have driven the Bible-believing peoples out, so they became refugees. And it was my responsibility, as Akinola assigned me, to serve in the first 5 years of seeing to the formation of what we now have as ACNA. So ACNA is a province of its own and is growing in leaps and bounds in the US. So the next place, of course, is Canada, and we have small representation in Canada, but it's a growing thing. So we're not looking at followership in terms of political followership. No, we're looking at faithfulness to God's word, faithfulness to God's ministry and mission. And that's where I am.
Earlier on, you did mention the killings of people just not too far away from here. Now, it would seem not just of course, Jos has been the hotbed of crisis. I mean, the tremors in Jos have resonated in the entire country in the last maybe 20 years, since 2001 to be precise. In fact, even preceding that. That I'm talking about just the recent challenges before we now went into totalized violence that we see. But of course, the impact in the entire country is massive. The persecution of churches, of Christians is huge. We went from basically just, little skirmishes here and there, now to fully weaponized attacks, using all sorts of weapons now on the church, on the Christian communities in northern Nigeria predominantly, even though there has been a split to the southern part of this country. How do you place the position of the church in this persecution? what had been or what has been the response of the church in this intensity, of the tragedy that we see continuously unfolding?
I think the Church of Nigeria is yet to come to grip with the fact that the church in Nigeria is facing persecution and will face persecution. And the reason is that the political narratives of the East, West, and North that was sold at independence in 1960, it is that narrative that the church has foolishly adopted. And the church is so engrossed in its regionality, and may I say expired regionality, that the church is not the church as it should be. If the church did not swallow the political narrative, Nigeria would have seen so much goodness of God that we would be persecuted, but not to the extent that we are now. Because normally those who believe in Jesus Christ will be persecuted, but will be persecuted for righteousness' sake. Now, the persecution we are going through now is not even for righteousness' sake. It's a political persecution. Righteousness could be part of it, but I don't think so. I think that the church has failed, and we have swallowed the political narratives, and we have imposed the political narratives and cultural narratives on the church. So now, when anybody is suffering persecution, people say, what tribe are they killing? We're not looking at what, it's because of those narratives. We are so split into our ethnic backgrounds that even without persecution, we would normally be fighting one another. Until we remove the political narratives and until we impose the biblical injunction of what the church ought to be. Because if you look at Galatians, the Christians there agreed we would neither be barbarians, nor Scythians, nor Jews, nor Gentiles, nor male, nor female. And that succeeded. Same to the letter of the Romans. Ditto, Ephesians. In fact, Ephesians didn't have it specifically, so that it went around both Jews and Gentiles and all the tribes. Similar struggle did Epaphras have in Colossae, that he had to move from Hierapolis, Laodicea, and back to Colossae, across tribe and across nationalities. So the church in Nigeria is still fairly weak in that it is holding on to its cultures, traditional cultures, and holding on to the political narratives. So the persecution that's going on in the church is not getting the correct, persecution against the church is not getting the correct narrative of persecution of the church. If it's persecution of the church, it would be across range of ethnicity, of class, of gender, and devoid of any other narratives, whether it is you come from the north, east, or south. So the persecution of the church seems to be only in the north. And the persecution of the church that is in the north also has people who come from the south, and they are being persecuted on the north. But those in the north always have a home to return to in the south for safety. But those in the north, those who have come from the south always have a home to return to in the south for safety. But those in the north have nowhere else to go. So it would seem that when we give a story of the persecution, we're talking about persecution of the Christians in the north. Well, when they finish killing the Christians in the north, guess what? They will move down south, because that was the weakness of the church also in North Africa that went into Europe up to Turkey. So history should be teaching us that we need to rethink and throw off all political narratives and all cultural narratives and be the church if we want to be the church. Then it will be persecution of the church. Now, not many people know, and I say this authoritatively, that our primate, Ndukuba, we were together in Zaria. In 1987, when I was camp chairman in 1987 of Zaria. So when I was going to be killed and we escaped, and the burnings of the churches and a few people were killed, Ndukuba was a casualty. He had been newly married. He lost all his wedding gifts and boxes and house and books. I thought he would be going back home. Ndukuba refused and was posted back to Kano as an evangelist of the rural areas in Kano. I testify visiting him, and some of the trees where he slept are today churches. Then he becomes principal of St. Francis. Again, the upheavals in Zaria would have turned him back home. He didn't. He stayed. Then he becomes bishop in Gombe. Had hardly spent a year, and I will never forget, because I had invited him to come and lead my Bible studies with clergy. When early hours of the morning, 3 to 4 a.m., I was called that he had been shot. I thought he had died. So I drove with my clergy early that morning to go to Gombe. And we met him bandaged, and his house, his daughters, his wife injured, and everybody else. And I said, well, Mutumina, we speak Hausa generally when we meet. He said, Babake. He said, Babake. I said, this one now, you've seen this hell several times. I want to advise, just in case people from the south come and approach you to go back down south. I had not finished making that sentence. He became angry with me. He said, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Babake, don't talk to me about that. I will die here. I'll be buried here. Now, that's the idea of the church in persecution. And who knows? Fast forward, God chose him the primate. And perhaps people will wonder why his heart and mind is here. For him, home is here with his wife and with his children. Is where Jesus has put him. Now, I use him as an example because he's the leader of our church. And people don't know why he's this desperate about the mission of the gospel of God. He has shared in the persecution of Christ here on this soil in the north. And that is the gift he brings as a primate. Now, if I speak of mine, people say, well, I'm a northerner. No, but here is somebody else. So I want us to understand that if we are Christians, we ought to be Christians with no geography, with no ethnicity coloring, no political nationalistic coloring, because at the gate of heaven, none of those will count. It is us in Christ that will count. So how am I managing? I tell you, I can't manage persecution. That's the truth. There was a time I lost weight. I lost weight to the extent that a colleague bishop asked me, are you well? I said, it's HIV. So they laughed. But he said, no, Ben, tell us the truth. I said, how can I not lose weight? When for 5 years in Jos, gunshots were going in the streets, the government did not care. This was 2001 to 2004. It then started again 2005 to 2008. No government could come to our aid. There's an army barracks, there are police, there is federal government. We were stigmatized in Jos. The Christians in Jos were stigmatized as people who hate Muslims, and that stigma has gone all over the world. And so when we are being killed, nobody rises to our help. Nobody rises to our sympathy, not from the south, nor anywhere in the world. In fact, I got letters from missionaries who had served in Jos who told me how disappointed they were with us because we were unkind to Muslims, which is not true. It was a stigma that stuck. And every day there is a gun bullet that I hear, I know I will be left with an orphan or with a widow. And that is what we have now. We now have a large concentration of orphans in Jos Plateau State and a large concentration of widows in Jos Plateau State. And nobody, because we've been stigmatized, nobody's listening. So any good that we do to people, whether they be Christians or Muslims, nobody's looking at that. We've been stigmatized as people who hate Islam. And it is not true. I grew up in this city. I went to primary school here. In our school, we are Muslim people. In my school, St. John's College, our Muslim kids till date. In any of my schools, are still Muslim kids till tomorrow. But we've been stigmatized. Nobody wants to see the good side of the church. And even Christians who don't care to find out the truth are not listening to us. So really, I don't know what I will do about the persecution we are going through. I'm not a happy man, and that's who I am till date.
Okay, let me write on that quickly to say, despite, or rather, even in view of the persecution, we have, let me rephrase this question, because you have carried the burden not only for the church, but also for the Muslim community that are within your diocese. I know you hate to say what you have done in terms of the transformation for communities and societies. But of course, I mean, just for the sake of putting into context and perspective, the role of missions and evangelism and reaching out with the love of Christ to anybody, irrespective of who or where they are coming from, with the burden of the accusations of persecution, could you just give us a little insight to the relationship between your work and the Muslim community in your diocese?
My work and Muslim community will continue to thrive anytime and anywhere in the world because we grew up together. When I was born, my father was one of the most educated people in northern Nigeria. I mean, his grade 2 was way back 1936, and he was the first headmaster here in 1936, grade 2. So in the government of northern Nigeria, when Sardauna, colonial masters first, but when they handed over to Sardauna, Sardauna was quick to pick out my father to help him set up schools, public enlightenment education centers, and so on. Who were my friends? My Almajiri friends. We went to Almajiri because I knew the houses where there was manshanu, there's good food, leftovers. I would remember in Zaria, I would go to, I would say Kubini, I would take them to the house of Baba Sadauki. I would take them to the house of Baba Zakaria Dimka. I would take them to the house of Baba Yusuf, the Fulani Christian man. These are wealthy people who are educated in Tudunwada areas, and they'll follow me. And I'll go, Alazi, why no? And they'll say, Almajiri. So every time they'll come and wait for me in front of our house, because I knew the house is where they would get better food. Until one day, Mama Zakaria Dimka, Mama Azumi, the day she caught me, I will never forget. I was begging. So my early school was Quranic. Alhamdulillah, Mina Shaydani, Kula Uzu, all of those were my early schools. I even slash allo. My mother was scared that I was going to be a Muslim. But that was how we lived. Right through in Zaria to Usasa, to Sokoto, to Katsina. So we have never been taught animosity against one another as human beings. That was not our upbringing in my generation. Where these animosities have come from, I will tell you, they are largely political. Because the Christians have not understood the Christian narrative, the political narrative, and the church has adopted it. Politicians have taken it up, and they use it to divide people for their own gains. When a political man wins elections, he no longer remembers those poor that he has used for killing. No. I mean, they are now crying. They are the people being killed by Boko Haram, by terrorists, by bandits, by abductors. It is the people, the farmers. The politicians who have propagated this nonsense don't remember the poor anymore. They have the liver to eat and drink and sleep. But they always know that we, the poor, all the time they come, they give 5 naira and deceive us again. Christians are going to take over, or Muslims are going to take over. And so They put the two together, and it is always the poor that are fighting and dying. I'm praying that the days of knowledge will come very quickly so that nobody believes these politicians are going. Because very soon, by the grace of God, the poor are going to rise against these politicians, and it will not be funny. It won't be, because they think now that they are thriving by training a Talibanistic people, by training a militia on either side. Believe me, when you arm an unregimented army, one day they will turn. It's there in history for anybody to read. So, in my own case, I will resist telling you what I do and what we are doing with in fact, I'm now an elder in the Muslim community, because a lot of some of the elders in the Muslim community in Jos were my juniors in primary school. They are people I know, whether in military school or anywhere else. We work together, and I think that we'll continue to do good to humanity, because I believe in the judgment of God. And I wouldn't say more than that. But I will encourage the church that we will do good to the household of God and to all the other people around us. And it's a matter of time. Change will come. Even if after we are dead, change will come, and God will honor his name.
Let me wrap this up perhaps by just asking, because Nigeria is so desperate in search of, so many things, in terms of the political divide and the quagmire we seem to be facing now, is the problem now of where the nation will stand going forward. But let me just concentrate a little bit on the issue of the crisis, because there's this desperate search for peace, so unity and everything. And you've heard, we hear a lot of the political narrative on the street, to just forgive and forget, let's come together, let's not bring religion, let's not bring ethnicity, let's not bring... But I do not hear the call for justice. In most of this, it's as if, so the impression is as if justice people may not necessarily get, so let me just forgive and forget. How do we move forward from here?
It is erroneously wrong to negate justice for anybody, even for your children. Because if you do that, your children will grow up with bitterness. When you are old and helpless and need their help, you will not get it the way you want. Thankfully, they are your children. They will bury you all right, but they will not be happy, and you will not be happy. It gets worse when it is community or communities, because the communities that have been wiped out of their ancestral lands with people killed, only a few have escaped. They will live with that trauma for 30 years. 30 years down the road, there will be revenge. They will come back to take their communities, and it will not end well. This is human history, right from the biblical times. If you take away people's lands when they are helpless, when they become strong, they will come back. So injustice is a manure as well as a seed that on its own will grow and breed another set of injustice. This is a history of humanity. No matter how much people say we forgive now, if the injustice is truly injustice, when they become strong, they will pay back cash. The Afghanistan is just most recent. Why are people running away? If this is a 100% Islamic country, 100% Sharia, why are people running away from the same Sharia? Why are people running away from the same people? So injustice always breeds another kind of injustice. The Nigerian politicians are the most unwise that I've ever seen on earth. Because if they read history, they should have known that building a nation is building a family. That is the only way to be safe. But building a religion or building a clan, or building a tribe, or building an ethnic theory never builds a nation. Even then, it doesn't even build the ethnic or clan or tribe or family that you want separate from people. I grew up, I was born in 1955, I'm 66 this year. There were no fences. I began to see fences only in the late 1970s. There were no fences in GRAs. There were no fences in comfortable. In fact, I will never forget in Bauchi, as a little boy, this time I was about 8 or 9, and we will be coming back from some Ungwa, and you pass by the market, and the market was empty, and the kinds, the things people were selling are there. Nobody had stores. They were there. In fact, even in Terminus here, nobody covered their things. They were there. Nobody stole. There were guards in this thing. But with the rise of insincerity, insincerity gave birth to bigger insincerities. Insincerities gave birth to bigger insincerities. People's eyes now are open. People know that their monies have been stolen by politicians who are sitting in places, and they have armed people to defend them. And so they're killing people to cover up their sins. These people are going to turn against them one day, mark my words, because any unregimented army is capable of anything. Otherwise, how would people get into NDA? A whole army institution. How would they ransack army barracks and ransack army formations in Mina and everywhere else? Injustice gives birth to more injustice. So if politicians are wise, they must sit down now and stop calling interreligious meetings and all those funny meetings that they call, which are just whitewash paints. They should sit down as serious politicians and say, look, let's build a nation, or let's build our state. Look at people who are building their states. It's only outsiders that come to invade them, but within them, they protect their states. But these are people who don't want to even build their state, not talk about build their nation, so they're taking their resources out elsewhere, and these poor people are seeing it. And now it is even better to be a bandit, because you will never be arrested and you will never be killed. The president said we should shoot every Fulani man with a gun who has been shot. So everybody is now becoming a Fulani man. Because when you become one, you will never be arrested, you will never be killed. Nobody is arresting criminals. Why? Because the criminals themselves are sitting in the seat of power. So when you arrest a criminal and bring, the police are frustrated because they arrest criminals and bring, then somebody from high up say, no, release them, let them go. So people are being released. That is the most, these people are just, this is not wise. I hate to say foolish, but that's what it is. Because if you build a just system, you don't have to be a Christian or a Muslim. Any just system will give birth to justice. Any day. That's how God created human beings, even without religion. Look, let me tell you how God works. God will never bless iniquity. He has never blessed it and will not bless it. So when you practice wickedness, no matter how much you go to mosque and church, forget about God. But when you do things right, any right doing, any right thinking, any right practice will be blessed by God, whether you are an unbeliever, pagan, or Christian, Jew, or anybody. God bless, because God is right. He is righteous. Let me tell you this. The seat of God, the imagination that we have of the seat of God, as the psalmist said, the stool holding the pillars of the seat of God is righteousness and justice. If you don't practice righteousness and justice, you can go and sleep. You can be the Pope. You can be anything. Forget about God. God has not changed Phil Azar. He will not change till end of the world. So nation building is simple. Very, very simple. The same thing with diocese building. I mean, I'm a bishop too. I fall in that judgment. How am I building my diocese? Am I looking after my clergy? Am I executing justice, or do I just punish people because I don't like their face? Or am I just training only those I like and not training anybody? Or am I giving justice to good or bad? No. Justice is an essential practice of where God is. If you see a revival, you see people speaking and doing and rejoicing, there is justice and there's righteousness. Take that out, forget about faith. You have none.
Does Nigeria have a future? I mean, if you look at the insecurity, you see the clamor for restructuring, you see the North seem to have made up its mind, the South seem to have made up its mind with all those things that we're going through now. Do you think in this current, situation, and do we have will we have Nigeria as it is now, perhaps in the next 5 or 10 years?
I said Nigeria has a future. Nigeria has always had a future. The reason is simple. The future of Nigeria is not in the hands of man. If God allowed the nations to be around the world, and Nigeria is one, it is beyond any humanity. If a group of a generation chooses to follow the evil path, and they choose the worship of Satan, like we see, sacrifice of human beings, shedding of blood, injustice everywhere, and that becomes the practice over time. God gives us time and again to change, and we refuse. God is capable to wiping away that generation and raising another. It has happened in several nations. When God does, you see people running away to second homes, to England, America, Abu Dhabi, or so on, and they'll just go and stay there for years with their children, but they can't stay here anymore. God can make this nation uninhabitable to wicked people. They will run when the time comes. So God can do that. On the other hand, when they repent and change and choose the path of goodness to humanity, kindness to humanity, and so on and so forth, God can do it. God has always done it. He did it before. England was worse than we were. But when the revivals and the movements of fear God came and took the land, then England changed. French followed. Germany followed. And then these people from Europe moved to America and changed America. So it's a possibility. It has always happened. God has not changed and has not changed his mind about goodness. So if we have a good leader now who says, God, I want to do your will, and he decides to start changing and brings justice and truth and righteousness on the table for everybody, there is no such thing as equality in terms of life. No, but there's equality in terms of creation. For we all are created equal in the sight of God. Now, if we agree with that, some will be poor, but let's look after the poor. Some will be rich, but let them not be thieves, and let them not oppress the poor. Some will be powerful, but they should not oppress the poor. Let them use their power for positive distance. And we have leaders who can do that. Once that is being done, God will still be God. And you say, wow, my children have changed their minds in Nigeria. I will bless them the more. But as long as this evil continues, blessing will leave us. No matter how much rich we are, our wealth is still very ugly around the world. Take your green passport anywhere in the world and see. You are an ugly person. No matter how much preaching good man you are, they will treat you as a criminal first. I have suffered it in Malaysia, even in Kenya, sir. Those of you who went with me in Kenya, anywhere in the world, we are not a good name. No matter how intelligent, no matter how wealthy, no matter how wonderful, we are still useless. Nobody takes us seriously. Our athletes went to Tokyo. How did they come back? Our own people who should have looked after them didn't look after them. It was all viral. So that kind of wickedness, if that is what we want to practice, God has a medicine for this kind of things nationally. So back to the question, we have a future in God. And here I want to appeal to the church that the sins of the world be not found inside the church, because the church, no matter how weak, is the single instrument of salvation for the world. And if we choose to walk with God, God can save this nation, provided we are also not guilty of the sins of the world in the church.
I think you've wrapped it up perfectly for us.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm so grateful. It's a privilege and honor for me to share these few thoughts, and I pray that God will bless our work together as ACNN and bless all that the primate is doing, and that we hearken and heed to the truth of God's word and put it in front of us, not just for knowledge, but for practice. I thank you.
Thank you so much.